Thank you very much. Good morning. Boker Tov, everyone. Erev Shabbat Shalom. We're going to be reading tomorrow. We've been learning over the past week 2 parshas, Acharei-Kedoshim. So it's a double power, and it's going to be a very special Kabbalah Café today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much to Gershom and Rachel Dandy for sponsoring this Kabbalah Café in honor of the Refuah Shlema of our dear friend Yoshua Mordechai Ben Fega. Jay Schechter should have a refuah shalema, complete recovery immediately, if not sooner. Amen. Before we start, I want to mention a couple of important things. First of all, we look forward to seeing everybody here tomorrow. And the subject of the sermon is going to, it's going to be very, very interesting in Mirz Hashem. Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock, all of you are invited to join us as we start the special Sefer Torah in honor of protection of Rechavia, Yerushalayim, and Eretz Yisrael. And I really hope that you'll all be able to be part of it, Be'ezrat Hashem. Tuesday night, we're going to have a special lecture from an experienced, someone that's very experienced in the whole subject of security, both here in Eretz Yisrael and in California. His name is Boaz, and the lecture will be live and online on Tuesday evening, Bezrat Hashem. So, a common denominator between the 2 parshas is the subject of love. Now, if we talk about V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, you should love your fellow Jew just as yourself, so that's quite obvious that we're talking about love and how to love your fellow Jew. Now, what would the connection be with the parsha of Acharei? So let's first talk about the subject of love as it works out in V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, and then we can move on to Acharei and connect it to a similar concept. When we say V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, you have to love your friend just as yourself. That's a very hard mitzvah to fulfill. Even if you have a friend, even a very good friend, to love your fellow Jew just as yourself, that's a very difficult thing to expect from someone. Because naturally, the way Hashem created us is that we love ourselves more than anyone else, anything else in the world. So the Torah, Hashem, expects of us to love every single Jew, kamocha, just like you love yourself. How is that possible? So, if we think about another concept of love, then that might help us. The statement that I'm going to say now is a little bit extreme. It's quoted from one of our sages, and he says as follows: the reason why Hashem brought marriage to the world is in order for us to understand how to fulfill the mitzvah of V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Wow. This is a statement from Rav Chaim Vital, who was the chief student of the Holy Arizal. Now, as we said earlier, it's really hard to understand how to love a fellow Jew properly, the way Hashem expects us to love every Jew. And so, when you think about marriage, let's see what the Rambam says. We have a mitzvah to love your wife, kigufo, like your own body, like yourself, ulachabda, and to respect her, to honor her, yoter migufo, even more than oneself. That means that there are 2 concepts. One concept is a concept of love, and another concept is the idea of honor and respect. When it comes to love, So you can expect a person to love a person tremendously, especially when it comes to a person's spouse. And as the halacha is, you have to love your spouse just as yourself. And the more that a person spends their life with their marriage partner, with their spouse, the love is built up more and more. Nevertheless, it's perfectly natural that sometimes there is a little bit of tension or not, let's put it, not the extreme level of love, the way it is, the way it should be, when it comes to even to a person that's closest to you. Because we're human beings, and sometimes one person doesn't do exactly like the other would expect. And unfortunately, it can come to a level of a lack of love. So our challenge is to reconnect and that great level of love the way it was beforehand, and even more than that. But then you have a different level of kavod. Kavod is respect and honor. Respect is even more than love, because respect needs to be there even if your feelings of closeness are not 100% there at the highest level. Respect there always has to be. You always have to respect your spouse. That's why the Rambam says that mitzvah, it's a mitzvah to love your spouse, love your wife, kegufo, just like you yourself. And then, lechabda, yoter migufo. Now, this idea of true affection and true love and a true relation and a deep relationship, the greatest level that it's possible to be in this world is marriage, a husband and wife, two spouses. That's the greatest level of love that a person can ever imagine. We know that there's a difference between the love of two spouses and the love between siblings. Each one has an advantage over the other. The love between siblings is compared to mayim betanugim, pleasurable waters, water that's flowing. It's nice, it's fresh, it's wonderful, but it's not necessarily burning. And it's not necessarily a flame of fire of love. It's passive, it's nice, it's wonderful. At least that's how it should be. But then, when it comes to spouses, then it's called Ava kirish ve'ish, love like a flame of burning fire, and it's obviously a much stronger level of enthusiasm and life than it is by siblings. Each one has a pro and a con, obviously. So the pro of Ava b'tanugim is that it's always there. At least it should be. Always there, just natural. It's in our DNA. We're siblings of the same parents, so we love each other, or at least that's how it should be. But by spouses, by two individuals which are married, the love, not only emotional love, but also physical love, bodily love, is so strong that it's like a flame of fire. On the other hand, it's not always like a flame of fire, because naturally two individuals from two different backgrounds, and sometimes needs to be strengthened, which is perfectly okay. But when there is a strong bond, it should be stronger and stronger. So Rabbi Chaim Vital says that that this idea of marriage, physical and emotional relationship is here in the world in order for us to understand how to observe the mitzvah of the ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You should love your fellow Jew just as yourself. Now that we have an example of how it needs to be, the regular love and passion between spouses, that's how it needs to be. The ahavta l'reacha kamocha. The mitzvah, like the quote of the Rambam, mitzvah le'ehov kigufo. You have to love your spouse like your own body, like your own self. And lechabda yoter migufo, and to honor and respect more than yourself. So if someone walks into the Beit Chabad and you're not in the best of moods, you have to respect every person. So you go to respect them, and you welcome them in, and you embrace them, and you say how nice it is to see you. Even if you were to look at them kigufo, like yourself, and you would be not in such a good mood, which is okay sometimes not to be in a great mood. But the moment that you see someone which that person is new, that person is perhaps shy, so it's our obligation to exercise the mitzvah of this week's parsha of v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Now, where do we have the idea of ahava in Acharei-Mot? Hebrew is the most amazing language. It's very exact, and it's based on root words. And there's so many different words that are connected and interconnected one with another. The word ahava has 4 Hebrew letters, aleph, hey, vet, hey. And it's very similar to another word in Hebrew, which is 3 letters, aleph, vet, hey, ava. What does ava mean? A desire. Something that you really, really like. Something that you really, really want. And in essence, that's really the root word of ahava. Ava means you have a desire, you have a love, you have a feeling, a very strong feeling of bonding and relationship with another person, with a concept, with an idea. You have a desire. And in the beginning of Acharei-Mot, we have the mitzvah, we have the story of Yom Kippur, the story more exact of the 2 sons of Aaron HaKohen, who had a strong desire to come into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, to come into the Holy of Holies. And because they did not do it in a healthy way, in a balanced way, they had a ava, they had a desire to receive more and more Kedusha. Therefore, their souls passed out. Now we have to remember that Hashem wants us to be in this world, and He wants us to live. He wants us to be healthy. He wants us to excel. On the other hand, we need to nurture this bond for Hashem, to want more and more godliness. The story is told about a great tzaddik. Rabbi Avram Nisachachav, and he told a story about the greatness of the great Yid of Pshischa. He said the Yid of Pshischa, he loved to daven. And when he davened, he almost would pass out. In fact, if not for his sons, who would guard him and make sure that he wouldn't get too overexcited and too over-emotional on how to be connected to Hashem, then he would have passed out much easier. So one day, his kids were, by chance or by divine providence, in the next room, and he came to the words right before the Yishtabach. Ve'alu Moshiim Bahar Tzion. And the saviors will go up to the Mount Zion. And this talks about Mashiach's coming, but it has another interpretation. of the neshama elevating higher and higher. The alu, they go up, and his soul passed out. He passed away. So obviously, this is a great tzaddik, and we're not judging anyone. I'm just bringing out the concept of how important it is to have this ahava, this love for Hashem. It comes from this bonding, this ahava, this terminology of bonding and connection with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Where did the two sons of Aaron HaKohen, where did they get this characteristic of having such a strong ahava, such a strong bond with Hashem? They got it from their father Aaron. As we read a couple of weeks ago in the Pirkei Avot, and we're going to be learning it soon in our course in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers, in the mornings. I think it's Mishnah 11 in the first chapter. Hevei mi talmidav shel Aaron. We need to be of the students of Aaron HaKohen. Ohev shalom, he loved peace. Rodev shalom, pursued peace. Ohevet habriot u'mukarvan laTorah. He loved the creations and brought them closer to the Torah. In other words, Aaron HaKohen was full-fledged Ahavat Yisrael. In his DNA, wherever you looked, shone the love of a fellow Jew. It was so beaming strong inside of him that in his children also came out this concept. It's known that very often children contain within themselves, they practice, and they have within their own midot, they have similar traits to the way their parents have. And sometimes even more. The Talmud says, Yafa midot ben mikoach ha'av. I'm just trying to remember the exact terminology. Yafe koach haben mikoach ha'av. The energy and the character traits of a child are more beautiful than the character traits of the father. And Chassidus has a beautiful short interpretation, deeper interpretation. Koach haben mi koach ha'av. The fact that a child can be more successful and have better character traits than the father is mikoach. It's from him. It's from the father. So even the fact that the child can be better than the parent, that itself comes from the parent. The parent has within itself the ability to be able to empower the child, that the child should be very successful and even more successful than the parent themselves. So that's why it just puts things very beautifully into perspective about how the children of Aaron didn't do something so bad per se. After all, they were following along the character traits of their father. It could have been better. It should have been better. And we learned from this how we should, on one hand, to balance, that we should have this ahava. It should just be balanced, that we should not pass out. It should be in a very relaxed, and not relaxed, in a very grounded way, that we should always remain here in order to continue the connection with Hashem. Otherwise, if you don't have this interpretation, a person can mistakenly look at the beginning of this expression and say, oh, Nadav and Avihu made a mistake. They didn't act the proper way. But if we realize that they were only following along the way of their father Aaron HaKohen, so then we know that they were going along the right steps. It's just that it should have been a little better and a little more grounded. For the final part of this Kabbalah Café, it's important to mention the second half of Acharei-Mot. The second half of Acharei-Mot tells us of immoral marital relationships also in Kedoshim, we also have in tomorrow's Chitat, and perhaps also in today's, we read about some of the immoral relationships. What are we saying over here in essence? Along the same note as we've been saying up until now, a person can say, God forbid, if it's not a relationship which is allowed according to Torah, so a person can say that they love the other person. So how can the Torah get in between these two individuals? So that's what the Torah says. If this quote-unquote love is bringing someone to a relationship, referring to specifically to a marital relationship, which is forbidden according to the Torah, then that is not called true love. True love is an expression of a special bond which is deep down inside. But if Torah does not allow it, Torah is our life. Torah tells us how to live. Torah empowers us and reveals by us the traits which we have and the traits which are allowed. In other words, it's impossible to have proper love for two individuals which are not meant for each other. So, for example, there's an excellent book which is written by Rabbi Lezer Shem Tov. He's a chief Chabad rabbi of Uruguay, and he wrote an amazing book in English. He's American. He's from Philadelphia, and he wrote an amazing book called "Rabbi, Why Can't I Marry Her?" Rabbi, Why Can't I Marry Her? If you want to look it up in order, it's an amazing book. This book is made up of two email correspondences between Rabbi Shem Tov and the Gentile guy who wanted to marry a Jewish woman. So usually the rabbi has to convince the Jewish individual not to marry the Gentile. But Rabbi Shem Tov is a genius, and he was able to convince two Gentile males why not to marry the Jewish girl. And it's based on the Rebbe's approach. And here's the point. The point is that you cannot properly love her if you're not from the Jewish faith. In fact, you are doing wrong to her. You are misleading her by telling her that you love her. And perhaps that's a main reason why a huge percentage of these types of marriages are not long-lasting. So if Hashem created you, told the guy, if Hashem created you that you should be a Gentile, then you have a mission to fulfill in your circle of life, and you should marry in your faith, but not interfaith, because you're misleading the girl, you're misleading the Jewish girl, and it's wrong. It's a love which is fake, and it cannot be a true deep connection. So I'm just bringing out the point that both sides of the coin. The majority of the class we talked about positive love and how we need to emphasize, and now we have to magnify it, both in marriage and in Ahavat Yisrael, and also Ahavat Hashem. We talked about loving Hashem. Nadav and Avihu had a good point based on Aaron, coming closer to Hashem, strengthening our bond to Hashem. At the same time, we have to remember to refrain from a wrong love, a wrong connection, which is not real. And it's important to remember that it's part of the same coin. The positive point and the prohibitive point. They're all bringing out, each one in their own way, the idea of kosher love, kosher bonding, and a strong connection with Hashem, or our fellow Jew. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to make a big announcement that Lag BaOmer is next Friday. Therefore, the Kabbalah Café next week will be on Thursday. That's number one. And Thursday evening at 6 o'clock, everyone is welcome to join us for a big Lag BaOmer parade with families and community. Everyone's welcome to come. It's going to be called a parade glowing in the dark. We're going to march through the streets of Rechavia and Nachlaot. We look forward to seeing all of you here together with us. Have a Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much to all of you. Be well.